There is a company out there right now um, worth more than MasterCard, Samsung, and Facebook combined.
Which is just a staggering amount of wealth.
Right. And it owns the engine that powers like half the world's video games. It has its eyes on the daily habits, the wallets, and the private conversations of 1.4 billion people.
Yeah, that's a massive slice of the global population.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yet if you walk down a street in the West and ask someone about it, its name is virtually unknown.
And, if you do happen to look them up, their official corporate mascot is just this cute, winking little penguin.
A penguin.
Right. Which is perhaps the greatest misdirection in modern business history.
It really is. Because based on the source material we are deep diving into today, a much more accurate mascot would be a giant octopus.
Oh, absolutely.
Just a massive, invisible leviathan swimming right beneath the surface of the internet with its tentacles wrapped around almost every industry you can think of.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
So today, we are taking you on a mission to uncover the history and the unbelievable influence of Tencent. We're going to explore how this one Chinese company touches almost every part of your digital life, whether you actually realize it or not.
It really is a masterclass in stealth and infrastructure, honestly. I mean, Tencent has achieved the holy grail of the tech world.
The ultimate prize.
Exactly. They have accomplished what every Western tech billionaire stays up at night dreaming about. They didn't just build a successful app, they built one app to rule them all.
Okay, let's unpack this because, to understand how they dominate that much of the globe, we have to look at their crown jewel.
Right. WeChat.
Yes, WeChat. Now, the average Chinese user spends 4 hours a day on WeChat. 4 hours. That is an astonishing amount of screen time for a single application.
Well, it sounds exhausting if you think of it like a traditional social media feed, right?
Trolling and scrolling.
Exactly. But WeChat isn't just something you scroll. Think of it more as the digital plumbing of an entire country.
Digital plumbing. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, you don't interact with the pipes directly. You just turn the tap to get what you need. WeChat routes the data, the communication, and the money for your entire day.
Right. Our sources literally call it an everything app. But I really want to get into the mechanics of how that actually works.
Sure.
Because they didn't just launch an app that did 100 different things on day one, did they?
No, not at all. And that's the genius of it, really. If you launch an app that tries to be WhatsApp, Uber, PayPal, Yelp, and Tinder all at once,
The user just gets totally overwhelmed.
right, it's too much friction. So Tencent evolved WeChat through incredibly shrewd, incremental feature additions. They started with basic chat, and then they essentially gamified human connection.
Like the drift bottle feature.
Yes, exactly.
This was wild to read about. You could type a message, put it in a virtual bottle, and just throw it into this digital sea.
Yeah, just toss it out there.
Right. And another random user picks it up and replies. It seems like a simple game, but it became this massive tool for making friends and, frankly, a wildly popular dating feature.
It did. But, the real shift, the moment they went from a communication tool to total financial infrastructure, that was the red envelope feature.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It's a perfect example of removing psychological friction. So in China, there is a deep Lunar New Year tradition of giving physical red packets of money to friends and family.
Right, it's a huge cultural staple.
Exactly. So Tencent simply created a digital version of this for the holidays. And the key is, it wasn't marketed as some big push into the banking sector.
It was just a game.
Right. It was presented as a fun, temporary social game where you could drop a few bucks into a group chat and your friends would frantically race to tap the screen and claim the money.
But the underlying mechanism is just brilliant. Because to send or claim that money, you had to link your actual bank account to WeChat.
Exactly.
If you didn't, you were literally leaving free money on the table.
Precisely. I mean, they used peer pressure and cultural tradition to completely mask the friction of signing up for mobile banking.
That's incredibly smart.
By digitizing a cultural habit, they accidentally birthed WeChat Pay. And today, WeChat Pay processes over 1 billion transactions a day.
A billion.
Every single day. To put that in perspective, that dwarfs Visa and MasterCard combined.
That is just nuts. Okay, so they have the communication and they have the money. But the true masterstroke, the thing that turned them into an empire, happened around 2017 with something called mini programs.
Yeah, this was huge.
Explain how this works, because this isn't just adding a new feature to an app. This is a structural bypass of the entire mobile internet.
It really is. So if we look at how the mobile internet functions globally, Apple and Google own the physical operating systems, right?
Ah,
iOS and Android.
right. They own the phones.
Yes. And they control the app stores, which means they are the gatekeepers. They traditionally take a 30% cut of everything you buy.
A massive toll.
Exactly. So Tencent realized, well, why should developers build separate apps that have to be approved by Apple? Tencent created mini programs, which are essentially lightweight, cloud-based web apps that don't require you to download anything to your phone's hard drive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are hosted entirely inside WeChat.
So if I want to order a taxi or check a restaurant menu, I don't go to the Apple App Store. I just open WeChat, search for the taxi company, and their interface opens right up inside the chat.
Exactly. WeChat essentially built an independent operating system sitting right on top of iOS and Android,
They built their own toll booth.
right inside someone else's house.
But wait, I have to push back here. Because Apple is notorious for protecting its walled garden.
Yeah?
I mean, they took Epic Games to court over this exact kind of bypass.
Mm-hmm.
Why did Apple just let Tencent build an entire shadow app store inside the iPhone?
Well, it wasn't without a fight, let me tell you. There was a massive Cold War between Apple and Tencent over digital goods, but
Ah.
honestly, it just comes down to leverage. Yeah. WeChat became so essential to daily life in China. I mean, you literally need it to pay for groceries, message your boss, or book a doctor's appointment.
Can't live without it.
Right. So if Apple had banned WeChat from the App Store, Chinese consumers wouldn't have abandoned WeChat, they would have abandoned the iPhone.
Wow.
Yeah. Tencent fundamentally flipped the power dynamic.
That is staggering leverage, and it presents this incredible paradox for you, the listener. Because Tencent achieved peak frictionless living. No juggling passwords, no downloading 50 different apps.
Sounds great.
It does. But the cost of that frictionless environment is absolute transparency. If one company is the plumbing for everything, they know who you date, what you eat, where you travel, and how you spend every single cent.
Every single piece of data.
Right. It's the ultimate trade-off between human convenience and an absolute privacy nightmare.
And that tension is really woven throughout their entire history because, to understand how one company acquired that much power, you have to look at where they started.
Yeah, let's go back.
Because it wasn't with some grand original vision of the future.
Not at all. The origin story is actually pretty funny because it starts with blatant plagiarism.
Totally.
So the founder is a guy named Pony Ma. He's an introverted coder, very quiet, totally different from the flashy tech billionaires we usually see in the West.
Right, not your typical Silicon Valley CEO.
No. And back in 1998, he and his team noticed an Israeli-American desktop chat program called ICQ gaining traction. So they just rip it off completely.
They literally copied the code.
Yeah. They tailor it a bit for the Chinese market and name it OICQ. They literally just slapped an O on the front of the name.
It's the ultimate scrappy startup move, but we have to remember the context of the Chinese tech sector in the late 90s.
Right. It was the Wild West.
Exactly. Execution mattered far more than original ideas. Baidu copied Google, Alibaba copied eBay. The race was just about who could capture the domestic market first.
But it was not a glamorous race at all. The source material paints this incredibly bleak picture of their early days.
Oh, it was rough.
Their first office was a cramped, cheap room in a loud neighborhood full of knockoff electronics vendors. And for some reason, there was a literal disco ball hanging from the ceiling.
Which is such a bizarre detail.
I love it, though. And they are bleeding cash paying for server space. Then AOL, who owned the original ICQ, hits them with a massive lawsuit.
All right, the walls are closing in.
It was so desperate that Pony Ma had to create fake profiles and pretend to be a girl in their own chat rooms just to keep the early users talking so the platform wouldn't look completely dead.
It's the classic fake it till you make it strategy, driven by sheer survival instinct. And, that desperation led to a very pivotal moment when they had to pitch IDG Capital for funding.
This is one of my favorite details from the deep dive. So Pony Ma goes to these venture capitalists. Now, normally in Silicon Valley, you walk in with a massive ego, promising to change the world and print billions of dollars.
Oh, yeah, lots of bravado.
Right. But Pony Ma walks in and uses brutal, radical transparency. He basically says, if you don't give us money, we will die. And even if you do give us money, I have absolutely no idea how we're going to make a profit.
Which literally breaks every rule of pitching.
Every single one.
But paradoxically, the investors were so refreshed by the lack of hubris that they just gave them $2.2 million.
Just like that.
Yeah, it gave them the runway they needed. They settled the AOL lawsuit, rebranded to simply QQ, and eventually found their monetization model by, once again, copying someone else.
Right, they saw a South Korean site selling digital clothes for custom online avatars.
Yeah, microtransactions.
They brought that feature to QQ, and suddenly millions of teenagers were paying real money to buy digital designer jackets for their chat profiles, just to show off their status. Microtransactions with almost zero overhead.
Huge profit margins. But here's where the story really shifts. Because to evolve from a scrappy, copying startup into the behemoth that built the Everything app, Tencent had to cultivate an incredibly brutal internal corporate culture.
The shark womb.
Yes, the shark womb.
Okay, for you listening, I have to explain this because it's wild. In nature, certain species of unborn sharks will actually cannibalize their own siblings inside the mother's womb.
Just brutal.
Right. And they do it ensuring that only the absolute strongest survives to actually be born.
And that's exactly how Tencent started operating. Around 2010, the mobile internet is booming, and Pony Ma is terrified of being left behind.
So what does he do?
Instead of assigning his best team to build a mobile chat app, he creates 3 separate internal teams. He gives them the exact same directive and makes them compete against each other in a race to the death.
Wow.
And the team that survived that internal bloodbath, that was the team that created WeChat.
It's a ruthless evolutionary process.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually you hit a ceiling, right? I mean, Tencent realized they couldn't just keep killing or cloning every competitor.
Right, they had built a terrible reputation. When they cloned Mario Kart to make their own racing game, it made them rich, but it made them a huge target.
So they shifted their entire corporate strategy. They realized their biggest asset wasn't their ability to write code. It was their massive user base.
Exactly. They became a kingmaker.
A kingmaker.
Yeah. Instead of fighting competitors, they became a massive startup incubator. Take JD.com, right? A massive e-commerce company. Tencent doesn't specialize in e-commerce logistics. So instead of building a clone to fight JD, Tencent just buys a huge stake in them.
Oh, I see.
Then they integrate JD right into WeChat's mini programs.
So they essentially open the floodgates, they take their billion-user fire hose of traffic and point it directly at their own investments.
Precisely. They guarantee the success of the companies they invest in by manipulating the environment around them.
Which brings us to a logical tipping point. So you've built the ultimate shark womb. You've established this self-sustaining ecosystem of microtransactions and king-making.
Yep.
But eventually, you saturate a market of 1.4 billion people. Your growth curve is going to flatline. So to survive, you have to export.
And this is where the giant octopus stretches its tentacles into the West. But they did it invisibly.
So invisibly. I mean, if you look at their portfolio, Tencent secretly has a major hand in companies you interact with every single day.
Oh, everywhere.
They've poured capital into Reddit, Discord, Tesla, Spotify, Snapchat, Universal Music. But the place where they hold a literal monopoly is the video game industry.
Yes. Tencent's gaming division alone brings in more revenue than Nintendo or Sony.
That is hard to comprehend.
It really is. They don't just invest in gaming, they swallow the biggest fish in the pond. They own 40% of Epic Games, the creators of Fortnite, and the Unreal Engine, which is the foundational software powering half of modern digital creation.
Right.
And they own 100% of Riot Games, the creators of League of Legends.
But what fascinates me is that even when they own a company outright, that old shark womb ruthlessness still flares up.
Oh, it never left.
I was reading the section in our source about the Riot Games betrayal. Can you break down exactly what happened there?
It's a perfect illustration of how they operate. So Tencent owns Riot Games, right? Tencent approaches Riot and says, hey, we want to make a mobile version of League of Legends for the Chinese market.
Okay, makes sense.
But the developers at Riot push back. They say, absolutely not. League is a complex PC game, and a mobile version compromises our creative vision.
So Riot says no to their parent company.
Right. And what does Tencent do?
Fire them.
No, they don't even argue. They just go behind Riot's back, take the core mechanics and intellectual property of their own subsidiary, and build a mobile clone themselves called Honor of Kings.
Oh, man.
They released it in China, and to add insult to injury, they used famous League of Legends esports players to promote it.
That is incredibly cold.
It is, but Honor of Kings became the highest-grossing mobile game in the entire world.
Right.
And this leads us to the core insight of how Tencent operates globally, something they codified in a legendary internal management meeting dubbed the Conference of the Gods.
Okay, if you're a competitor, that name alone should terrify you. What was the insight from that conference?
It's the fundamental difference between Western tech giants and Tencent. In the West, a company like Meta operates on an ad revenue model, right?
Right. They sell ads.
They harvest your data to sell your eyeballs to external advertisers. But Tencent operates on a structural equity model. Because they control the WeChat ecosystem, they have perfect data.
Right.
They can see exactly which independent mini programs are generating the most revenue.
So they can see everyone's cards.
Exactly.
Right.
So step one, they identify the winners. Step two, they buy equity in those winning companies. Step three, they tweak the WeChat algorithm to send even more traffic to the companies they just bought into.
Wow.
They harvest data not to sell ads, but to buy the companies generating the data. It is a completely rigged casino, and Tencent is the house.
That is genius.
They don't care about slapping their logo on a skyscraper in New York or London. They just want the underlying equity.
Which brings up a glaring question. Because if Tencent is this rich, this strategic, and their everything app model is this lucrative, why isn't WeChat globally dominant? Why isn't it on all of our phones right now, the way TikTok is?
Well, the answer to that lies entirely with their silent, most powerful partner.
Okay, wait. Before we unpack this next part, I need to explicitly state something for you, the listener. Our source material dives into some politically charged realities regarding the Chinese Communist Party. And to be totally clear, we are not taking sides or endorsing any viewpoints here. We are strictly reporting the facts and the history exactly as laid out in the source document.
Understood, absolutely.
So we talked earlier about the incredible convenience of the Everything app. The dark side of that convenience is the mechanics of the surveillance state.
Yeah, it gets dark.
Amnesty International actually did a massive report on how global messaging apps handle user privacy and encryption. Out of 100 possible points, they gave Tencent a score of 0. A literal 0.
And that score exists because the line between Tencent's corporate servers and the Chinese government essentially does not exist. By law, whatever data Tencent has, the state can access.
And it's not just metadata or location tracking. Private messages and images sent on WeChat are actively scanned in real time.
Every single message.
The mechanics of it are chilling.
Yeah.
If you type a phrase the government has flagged, the app just quietly deletes the message. Your friend never receives it, and you were never notified it was blocked.
It just vanishes.
Right. But the consequences can be much worse. The source gives an example of a citizen who made a lighthearted joke in a private group chat about a government official and was literally tracked down and jailed for a text message. State authorities have openly admitted they can pull deleted WeChat conversations right from the servers without any court permission.
And that surveillance network extends far beyond China's borders, too. If you use WeChat in the US or Europe to talk to family, your data still flows through those same monitored servers.
Right, and Tencent has actually used its financial weight to enforce this censorship abroad.
Oh, yeah, the NBA incident?
Exactly. Remember in 2019 when Daryl Morey, the manager of the Houston Rockets NBA team, tweeted support for protests in Hong Kong?
I do.
Tencent Video, which had a multi-million-dollar deal to stream NBA games in China, immediately pulled all Houston Rockets games. The financial threat to the NBA was so severe that Morey was forced to delete his tweet, publicly backtrack, and apologize.
Right.
Our source even notes that many Chinese tech headquarters have physical internet security police rooms built directly into their corporate offices.
And this is exactly why WeChat failed to conquer the West. I mean, the convenience of an everything app is incredibly alluring. But international users and foreign governments are terrified of the surveillance implications. Both India and the United States have labeled WeChat a national security threat.
So for years, it's basically a Faustian bargain. The CCP allows Tencent to grow into a monopolistic giant because, in return, Tencent provides the state with the greatest population control and surveillance infrastructure in human history.
Exactly. But here is the massive plot twist in our deep dive. The creator turns on the monster.
Which is crazy.
Around 2020, the Chinese government dramatically shifted its stance on big tech. They initiated a brutal, systemic crackdown.
But why? I mean, if Tencent was giving them everything they wanted, why break the toy?
Because the state began viewing these massive tech conglomerates companies like Tencent and Alibaba as genuine threats to their own absolute power.
Ah, I see.
First, these companies were creating massive wealth inequality, which directly contradicts the CCP's core messaging of common prosperity. But more practically, the government realized that allowing one private company to hold all the data, the financial routing, and the attention of 1 billion citizens is a massive structural vulnerability.
Too much power in one place.
Right. They needed to remind the tech billionaires who was actually in charge.
And the consequences for Tencent were just staggering. Out of nowhere, state media starts publishing articles referring to video games as spiritual opium.
Spiritual opium.
Yeah. Regulators completely freeze all approvals for new game releases. They mandate that kids under 18 can only play video games for a maximum of 3 hours a week.
And you have to look at the mechanics of how they enforce that. Tencent had to literally build facial recognition software into their mobile games.
That's dystopian.
It checks the player's face against police databases in real time to make sure a 14-year-old isn't sneaking online on a Tuesday night.
It's unbelievable. And they had to completely alter existing, massively popular games to fit socialist values.
Oh yes, the PUBG example is wild.
Right. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, the very popular violent battle royale shooter.
Exactly. So the government forces Tencent to change it for the domestic market. They rename it Game for Peace.
Game for Peace.
Yeah. They remove all the blood and replace it with this bizarre green liquid. And the most surreal part, when a player gets shot and eliminated, their character doesn't die.
What do?
They just stand up, wave goodbye to the person who shot them, and cheerfully vanish.
It sounds totally absurd, but the financial impact of this crackdown was anything but. The fines, the frozen game approvals, the sudden regulations, it wiped $500 billion off of Tencent's valuation.
Poof, gone.
$500 billion in value, just vaporized by state decree to prove a point.
Which brings us back to why this all matters to you, the listener. Why should you care about the rise and regulation of a Chinese tech giant when you might not even have their app on your phone?
Because knowledge is about recognizing the invisible infrastructure of the world around you. Even if you've never used WeChat, Tencent's tentacles are in your life.
Right.
They are the engine behind the video games you play. They own pieces of the social platforms you scroll. They even influence the movies you watch.
Oh, the movie stuff is fascinating.
Tencent helped finance Men in Black International, but they quietly pulled their funding out of Top Gun, Maverick the last minute, because they were terrified that the pro-American military themes would anger the CCP.
Wow.
They're quietly shaping global culture by controlling the purse strings.
Tencent really is the ultimate modern case study in what happens when the lines between corporate monopoly and state power completely dissolve. They show us the staggering, frictionless efficiency of a totally integrated digital life, but they also expose the terrifying fragility of it.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought to end on today. Recently, in the West, we've seen tech billionaires, specifically Elon Musk, openly talk about turning X into a Western everything app.
A carbon copy of the WeChat model.
Exactly. Payments, video, chat, rideshare, banking, all in one single place.
The allure of that convenience is universal. Everyone wants less friction.
They do. But based on what we've just unpacked about the mechanics of Tencent, you have to wonder, if the ultimate convenience of an everything app is the inevitable future of the internet, is it even technically possible to build one without it becoming the ultimate surveillance tool?
That's the big question.
Right. Whether it's built in the East by a state government or in the West by a private billionaire? Can we ever truly have total convenience without sacrificing total privacy? Or is the invisible giant octopus just waiting for us all?
It's a question we'll all be answering with our data very soon.